Happy New Year, Victor. You know what I'm looking forward to in 2025? Sitting down and working through my finances.
That will get the people going. Sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's not the most fun of exercises, if I'm going to be honest, but the beginning of the year is really a great time to take a step back and look at where you are, where you want to go, and what adjustments you should be making. It's a great time for tax deferral to next year, for just all of those adjustments that you might need to make looking at the year ahead.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate the old adage is you can't manage what you don't measure. So you can't really keep track of your finances if you don't get some of these things straight. And so I think kind of talking first from a personal finance perspective, knowing what you have and where it is really the first step. Because I think as we mature, as our financial lives get more and more complicated, you end up with accounts in different places, more credit cards, debt balances in different places. And so really sitting down and at least making a checklist of, hey, here are all my accounts. Hey, I've got this checking account or this savings account, and then listing those out. I've got these investment accounts, and then I've got these places where I owe money, whether it's, hey, I've got this many credit cards, or I've got this many places where I pay debt. Really organizing that and, keeping a list, keeping that somewhere where it's together so that you aren't just scatterbrained about where your finances are is really that first step. And then I think the next important part, and we can talk about consolidating accounts and we'll definitely talk about simplifying your financial life, because that can remove a lot of stress from people, really help you, just have peace of mind, peace of life, because no one wants to stress about finances. And it's, part of our job when we were working with clients to help set people up for financial success. And so I think a part of that too is really defining what your budget looks like. It's amazing how many people don't really set a budget for themselves. And if you can afford not to set a budget for yourself, that's great. I wish I could say the same. But, I went through this exercise recently. I try to keep on track of it on a monthly basis just to see where I'm at personally. But I think by setting a budget, it's really important because you can see, hey, what are my assets or my cash flow coming in, what's going out, and what can I really spend money on? So setting, I think, minimums and maximums for different levels of spending. Hey, I'm going to contribute a minimum amount to my investment accounts every month, but I'm only going to spend a maximum amount on eating out or different things, I think is really important. And then as a part of setting that budget, I think probably the most critical piece is knowing what those fixed payments look like for you. And so these are typically debt levels. That's going to be a mortgage, student loans, car loans, any other kind of debt that you owe. And by looking at what your debt currently is and those different pieces, it's going to be good to prioritize how you're going to pay off that debt. Because the thing about debt is that it can be very empowering. I mean, nobody could really buy a house if you had to pay cash up front. We all need mortgages. We're not all blessed enough to have enough cash to buy our house outright. So, a mortgage is a beautiful thing, but the problem is you want to stay on top of that. And so I think your mortgage, if you have one, along with your other pieces of debt, look at, hey, if you have investments, you're going to contribute to investments this year, are they making more than what your debt interest cost is? Because something like a credit card balance, you're going to be paying upwards of 20+% on that credit card balance. And so, you should definitely be prioritizing paying that off before you're going to contribute anything to your investment accounts. Well, on the other hand, you've got something like a mortgage where, hey, you may be, if you're really lucky during COVID, you probably finance that at a very, very low attractive rate. But even right now, say you're in the 5-6% range, well, you could probably do a little bit better by investing in the stock market. So it may not make sense to, pay off more than you really need to on the mortgage. And then the benefit of mortgages and student loans is that interest is tax deductible. So you're actually getting the tax benefit on those, which a lot of people may not initially think about. So it's actually a little bit better of investment, alternative to put your money towards something like stocks, bonds, because you're carrying that interest benefit for your taxes on something like a mortgage, student loans. Whereas your other loans, credit cards, car loans, not getting that interest benefit. So it's kind of better to pay off stuff like that first.
Yeah, definitely. And while you're doing that is a great time to go ahead, look at all those liabilities and, match that up to the assets that you own to calculate your personal net worth. So you own your house, your car, little investment account maybe, and what debt do you have on top of that? Your mortgage, your auto loan, maybe, hopefully not some credit card loans, stuff like that, student debt, and just kind of calculate your total net worth. That way, you get a good basis for which to budget. And then you can start setting your goals, whether that's paying off that credit card or, I want to invest for my child's future, their education, a big trip I want to take, just whatever life event may happen. Hey, I want to buy a vacation house. That would be awesome. That's when you can start planning those goals, beyond your New Year's resolutions. What are your financial goals for the coming years, plural, and how do we start, taking steps to achieve those?
Right. And I think the big part of it, like you said, maybe it's not super fun at the beginning to get all of this organized, but once you do, it's relatively easy to maintain. I know that I personally keep a monthly budget, keep a monthly balance sheet. And once you kind of get it going, it's very easy to maintain on a month-to-month basis. And then, of course, on your annual basis, now that we're in 2025, you look at, hey, what are my new financial goals for this year? Maybe what can I shift? What's going to look a little bit different? And it's always going to be evolving. I mean, we always talk to our clients, your financial picture is something that is always changing. And so being able to be flexible, learning from that and then adjusting accordingly is the best way to go about it. And so, I think now that we've talked a little bit about the personal finance stuff, kind of, the planning aspect that's going to set you up for success, I'd love for us to share some kind of, key tidbits or some things that we like to remind our clients of. And so a lot of these have to do with estate planning. So if you're married, if you have kids, if you have loved ones that, you want to have your assets passed to at some point, if something were unfortunately to happen to you, or eventually if you were to pass away, it's really good to stay organized and get in front of all of this to save your loved ones a lot of trouble in the case of something bad happening to you. And I think one thing that's like very overlooked for a lot of people, and that's very easy to do, is just by creating a list of people to contact, accounts, things that are going to set up your beneficiaries for success, whether that's your spouse, your kids. If there is something that happens to you, you can keep it in a safe. But this list should really cover, hey, here are my accounts, whether that's checking, savings, investment accounts, where they're located, whether that's with a custodian like Fidelity or Schwab, or if it's with a bank, Chase or Bank of America, where those accounts are located, and then your key contacts for all of this information. So if you have an estate attorney, who's your estate attorney? What's their phone number? What's their email? If you have a financial advisor, what's their contact information? Having your key contacts that are going to help out your family in case something happens to you, very important. Where all the assets located, who are the people to contact if something were to happen to me? And so I think that is something that's very easy to do. You already have this contact information and this, account information at the touch of your fingers. And so just by putting that on a list, and you don't have to, disclose more than necessary, but just enough to give your loved ones, access and some kind of direction if something were to happen to you, can be a really big beneficial step in a worst case scenario type situation.
Yeah. And that's one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've come across that I haven't seen everywhere, is just having that list. I've heard so many stories of people, being saved basically by this list of, hey, here's our financial advisor. I know, one spouse might not meet with them as much, or maybe as a premarital relationship that it's, between, one spouse and the financial advisor, and the other spouse just got brought into it. They're not super involved, and that's great. But who is this person? Who's, the lawyer that drafted your wills? That's another big one, is to have a will, because everyone technically has a will. If you don't have something in writing, it's just called probate. And that's where the state kind of decides where your money and your assets go. So, one thing we encourage everybody to do is to make a will, even if you don't need it, especially if you don't think you need it, because it's unexpected things happen, or it's just good rigor as part of that list that you're talking about, to have a will, to have, thought through this before. Because even if it's an old copy, at least that can be shown in probate to kind of back up what your intentions are after you pass with your money. Because you want that to go to the right areas, to the right people who you really care about and want to support. And, it doesn't always happen like you'd like it to if the state's just put in charge of it, because they don't know. So they're just going to divvy it up however they see fit. So part of that too is to review the beneficiaries that you have on your investment accounts. This is a big one that gets overlooked a lot, is that retirement accounts legally have to have a beneficiary, but a lot of people's individual accounts don't have them unless you go out of your way to set a beneficiary. But this is just another way to get these assets that go directly to who you want them to go to. They skip probate. You don't have to worry about it. It's just an immediate transfer to that person. And then, being the start of the year, it's a great time to just review, even if you've already set beneficiaries, or you're like, oh, I think I did that. Sounds familiar. Because we've seen a lot of people where, they've changed their will, they've changed all of their documentation, but, maybe after a divorce, after a marriage, maybe they've never updated the beneficiary on their account. So maybe their, IRA is still being sent directly to their ex. That, you don't want to do that, but that's an easy mistake to make. And it's something that we really, really want people to look at, because it's super easy to do. It's a super powerful thing to be able to just, immediately have it transferred to somebody else. But, it's a dangerous thing the same way, as you want to make sure it's going the right way.
Right, exactly. And I think nobody wants to think about, hey, what if something were to happen to me, or, hey, there's a chance that, I could pass away suddenly or something might happen. But if you can do just a few hours of work up front, get your will drafted, title your accounts properly. And if someone like a financial advisor could certainly help you organize all of this, but by doing that up front, you're going to save your loved ones, potentially save them months of complications, maybe even years, because this can be a very complicated process if you're working with the state, working with the government to work through that asset dispersion after your passing, or in case of some kind of incapacitation as well. It's good to have someone who can act on your behalf if something were to happen. All of a sudden you can't operate your accounts or talk to your advisors or things like that. And then I think, so we've kind of gone through some of the personal finance stuff. So setting your budget, being sure of where your accounts are, where they're located, being organized around what your finances look like. Then your estate planning type of things, where you're talking about your will, talking about your beneficiaries, titling your accounts properly, having the right beneficiaries on there. And then I think it's also important to review your investment accounts. Of course, this is a lot of what our job involves, but making sure that you are organized about, hey, what are some things that I can do in the new year to, shore up my investments. We do a lot of this for our clients, so they don't even have to really, worry about it themselves. But I think a big part of that is reviewing your positions and investment portfolios. It's the new year, so you're talking about a new tax cycle. So if you have outsized positions in your portfolio, you can kind of rebalance that, change some position sizing, especially if you already have long-term capital gains from the positions that you hold. Well, if you make some sales, take some gains, you're not going to have to pay taxes on that until April of next year in 2026. So you get the benefit of you're putting off that taxes, where if you were to sell these things last month, back in December, you would be paying tax on it this year. So you have that kind of benefit. And I think that's probably a good first place to start as far as looking at your investments, making sure you kind of reorganize them so that your portfolio is balanced, something that, of course, you and I are looking at for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. And, again, being the new year, great time to look at your retirement accounts, especially because there are lots of ways to take advantage of those. Set up, make sure you're making Roth contributions if you're eligible. Roths are very powerful accounts that they do have a salary cap. So if you make a certain amount of money, you can no longer add to them. We're going to touch on a backdoor Roth conversion later. Another way, if you make more money than is allowed to put into a Roth, then you can, there are ways to get it into a Roth basis retirement account. Touch on that in a minute, but make sure you're taking advantage of your employer's matching. If they have any kind of retirement matching for 401k contributions, a lot of companies do, 100% of the first 2 or 3% that you contribute. 100% match on your retirement account. I mean, that's 100% return on day one. There's no better investment than a guaranteed 100% return on day one. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. And along with that too, look at your 401k investment options, because these are generally really limited. Fidelity has a program called Brokerage Link that allows a financial manager to manage it for you. And that really opens up your investment options. I'm sure Schwab and other custodians have similar options. So you can get a financial advisor on that, or you can just take a look at what your options are and really make sure that you're maximizing this. Because one thing I like to point out to people that, kind of goes unnoticed a lot is that target date funds, which are generally like your default option in a retirement account, those actually change every year over the course of your life. So as you get older, they go more heavily skewed towards bonds. And so even if you're happy with that initially and performance has been good, if you haven't looked at it in 5 years, maybe the portfolio has really shifted a lot. So it's a different investment than what you owned previously and what were you happy with previously. Along with bonds are great, can be great investments, great for a lot of applications. But as we saw a couple years ago, when the Fed started hiking rates really aggressively, if you were 70% into bonds right before retirement, your investment portfolio did terribly. And that was a really dangerous place to be in. So if you're not paying attention to that and you're trying to retire into a Fed hiking cycle, that's going to be a tough time. So just, keeping a broad idea of what you actually own is really important.
Yeah, I think, to your point from earlier, if you have a financial advisor who can consult you on your holdings in your 401k, it's extremely helpful. Even better if they're already managing your outside assets. If they can manage your 401k, we do that for a lot of individuals whose firms allow that. That's even better because it's a very much more customized, personalized investment plan for your 401k alongside your other assets. And I think talking about retirement accounts, I think a great thing to do, you're doing your spring cleaning here in the new year. What can help that peace of mind, going back to talking about your financial balance sheet, all of your accounts, is consolidating some of those. A lot of people have multiple IRAs and you don't really need that. I mean, it's much more efficient to just have them all in one account. So you can consolidate that into one account. You only need one traditional IRA, one traditional Roth. Those can be consolidated in a much easier way if you have multiple accounts, because maybe you had multiple employers with different 401ks. Those got converted to IRAs. And then all of a sudden you've got all these accounts flying around. Well, you can work with somebody to help you consolidate all of that, or call your custodian where they are organizing all of this for you, get those consolidated. And then going back to what you're talking about Roth conversion, the new year is going to be a good time to consider converting your traditional IRA to a Roth. Because one, you're going to be doing your taxes pretty soon. You'll have a good idea of what last year's tax situation looked like, which bracket you're falling into. If your tax situation is going to be similar this year, then you're going to kind of know what your conversion costs are going to be, because as we know, in a traditional IRA, you're committing pre-tax dollars to that account, and you're not going to be taxed on that until it's pulled out. Well, whereas a Roth, these are post-tax dollars that are going to grow tax-free, and you get to pull them out in retirement tax-free. Well, you can do what you were alluding to is a Roth conversion, where you convert your traditional IRA by paying the taxes on those dollars now, converting that into a Roth where those investments can grow tax-free for the life of the account until you pull them out. You get tax-free dollars back, no taxes owed. Well, this can be very beneficial to think about in this coming year, because say you're going to have a lower tax year, maybe you're taking some time off of work, or maybe you just retired, you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. Well, it could be a good time if you have, an expectation for living for a significantly longer period of time. You have time for these assets to grow and make up that tax difference. Well, you can go ahead and do the conversion now and let that grow tax free for the rest of your life until you're ready to pull that money out. So that could definitely be something worth talking to your advisor about if you have an advisor, or just exploring, because as you said, a Roth is a very powerful tool. And even if you are making more money than the Roth cutoff is at, well, you can still do that conversion where if you've been contributing dollars to a traditional IRA, you can convert that to a Roth and experience that long-term growth.
Yeah, I think these are all great things to keep in mind. I know it's a lot for our listeners. It's a lot of things to do. I'm currently working through this myself, and it's a lot of stuff to do, but even taking a few points as you can, just making sure that you can at least keep these things in mind is really big. And so start where you can, do take it in bite-sized chunks, but would really encourage everybody to at least consider these things, and work through what you can. And again, like we've mentioned a couple of times throughout this is a great time to maybe reach out to a financial advisor, even just for a consultation, or just help talk through some of this stuff, because there can be a lot of complexities to these things. And it's really good to seek professional advice if you don't feel comfortable with what you're doing. And so, these are some of the most fun conversations that I know I get to have with clients is, when we're actually sitting down, working through something like this, and taking these tangible steps, because I love looking at investments and working hard to make sure the portfolio grows well. But some of these have very direct impacts on people and are what I'd classify as low hanging fruit a lot of the time. And so, like you said, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so it's, that really gets you a great start to all of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you're not paying attention to, your finances, all these things, then it's going to go by the wayside. And I think everybody in life wants to see financial success, whatever that vision looks like for the individual, but you're not going to be able to attain that if you don't measure what you have, if you don't have a starting point and an end point, a dream or a goal that you want to achieve. You're still not going to have directionality to that. So Hunter, exactly as you're saying, couldn't have said it better myself. And hopefully our listeners have some takeaways from this conversation.
Thanks.